Everybody's all quiet and ready to go. How you guys doing today?
Right.
Yeah?
We got some more seats up here in front,
You have a couple
scattered
seats
around.
if anybody wants to sit down.
Good.
Welcome to the Art of Organizational Manipulation. I am Brian Fitzpatrick. Most people call me Fitz.
And I am Ben Collins-Sussman. Everybody calls me Ben Collins-Sussman.
So we are engineering managers at Google. I see a lot of familiar faces in the audience,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool. And we started the Chicago engineering office back 1,000 years ago in 2005. And we've been working as engineers and engineering managers for a lot longer than that.
Yeah, and in the course of our travels, like you said, we've gone from software engineers to management. We've worked on a bunch of teams at Google. We've worked in open source for many years. And so over that period of time, we've sort of developed a bunch of stories and experiences that we want to share with you. And we've been doing that for a few years now. And this year, we want to talk about life inside a large corporation.
As usual, we like to start our talks also with a disclaimer. We have a very brief one here. And basically, the same thing that applies to all our talks, which is that these are our opinions. And some of it doesn't actually apply if you're working for morons or if you are a moron. But our point here is that if this is our opinions, and if you don't like it, you can get your own talk. And lastly, we think that what we're talking about here is not the only way to do engineering, but we think it's the most effective way to spend your time when you're working in engineering.
It's true. Doing software engineering is fun and a lot of work, but really, if you want to be super efficient and effective, you need to learn to work with people and with corporations. So that takes us to our next slide, which is that corporations, companies, as you think about them, they are not made out of source code, and they're not made out of
compilers.
They're not made out of brick and mortar. They're actually made out of people.
Companies are made entirely of people. And people are what not only make things happen, but people in companies are what prevents things from happening in a lot of cases
or
as well.
Or cause things to happen.
Occasionally they do cause something to happen. But more than anything, if you're going to be an engineer in a big company and make things happen, you need to learn how to navigate them. Okay? Now, if you're in a small company or a startup, in fact, maybe we should do a quick question. How many people here work in a company of less than 15 people? Okay.
It's like half the audience.
Yeah,
right.
16 to 100? 100 to 1,000?
There we go.
Bigger than
That's
1,000?
Wow. All right,
okay.
There we go.
All right, you're going to like this. So you're the guys who need the flashlight, a GPS, and a big truck of breadcrumbs to navigate your organization.
Yeah. All right.
Right, and so that's a lot about what we're here to talk about. Now, I'm aware that the term organizational manipulation is a little weird.
It's a little sensational, isn't it?
It's a little bit, we like sensational titles, like poisonous people, that sort of things.
We could have just said a talk about office politics, right? But we like to call it organizational manipulation.
You could also call it social engineering if you'd like.
That's a good thing. Exactly.
So there's three parts to this talk. We're going to give away all the surprises at the beginning. There's three parts. We're going to talk about working in the ideal company, the reality.
Just to get a nice diff there, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's the company that most people find themselves in at one point or another, and that we found ourselves in the past. And lastly is the manipulation, which is the awesome part. But most companies are a blend of the ideal and sort of the reality.
So you get to pick and choose what applies to your situation as we chat. So let's start with the perfect environment. Like what should it be like to work in a large corporation, right? Let's talk about.
We'll make this quick because this isn't very interesting.
No, it's good stuff. I like this. So the first thing you need to think about, at least what we preach in a lot of our talks, is that management is a bad word. That really we talk about leadership, not management, right? Because the worst thing that managers do is they manage, right? And that's stop managing, right? Start leading. And what it means to lead is it means you should be a servant to your team. If you have a good leader, it could be a manager, it could be the person you report to, their job is not to tell you how to do your job. Their job is to remove roadblocks and sort of be like a butler to your team and make sure everyone is efficient and happy, right? Now, I'm sure that's exactly the way it is in your company. But that's the ideal that we preach, and that's what we try to practice as managers ourselves, right?
And often fail at, but that's how we learn, right? So we get better at these things, I think.
Right.
But I mean, when I first started, the first time I had a meeting with our CEO at the time, Eric Schmidt, he came to Chicago, and this long meeting with him, I was very nervous, and he's asking me all these questions, and at the end of the meeting, he leaned back, he said, "So what do you need?" And I mean, I had done all this preparation for all these answers to all these questions he was going to ask me. I had no answer for this. I just sort of, I'm like, what do you mean? What do I need? I'm just some dude. You know, you're the CEO, man. Aren't I supposed to do everything for you?
That's a great question.
It's a fantastic question, and it's one that I like to ask people who work on my teams as well. What do you need to get your job done? What do you need to be happier, to be more effective? And I can guarantee you the next time I met with Eric, I had an answer, I had a whole laundry list of things that I needed because I was ready for that next time.
But that's great in the sense that Eric saw himself as there to help you, not grill you and what have you done for him lately kind of thing. Right. That's a great example of good leadership. So the other thing we'd like to talk about, if you're working in this ideal company, is that as an employee, you should pursue responsibility. And what we mean by that is being able to leave your comfort zone and do things that are interesting to you and things that you think are best for your product, best for your company, not necessarily with asking permission. We like to talk about seeing the forest through the trees, right? Sort of novice engineers get told what to do. They expect to get told what to do. They do exactly what they're told, and they come back and they say, more work, please, right? And in a great company where you can grow, when you have software engineers who are growing and developing, you have a situation where they're actually doing more than what is asked of them. They go out, they not only do what was asked of them, but they come back with a more general solution or a proposal to get something better done, right? There's generalization going on. Right, and that should be rewarded, right? And that should be encouraged.
Right, the example is if you're a forest ranger, they send you out in the forest to cut down the diseased tree. The novice forest ranger is going to go in, cut down the diseased tree, and come back and say, I'm done, sir. And then, but the more experienced one might come back and say, I've cut down the tree, we've removed all the branches and the stump and everything, and I found 57 other trees that have the same disease, and they're right here in this map. Would you like me to do something with them as well?
Create a plan.
Exactly, it's creating a plan. And those are the kind of people who wind up getting more work, which is usually a good thing if you like what you're doing.
It's the reward for work.
The reward for good work is more work.
Sure. As long as
it's
you
a
like
good
the
thing.
work.
No, really.
As long as you like the work.
As long as you like the work.
Right.
But I mean, your leader is more likely to give you more interesting things to do because it's less work for them.
They trust you now.
And
they see that you're thinking big.
Exactly.
So what else happens in an ideal corporation?
Well, you might question things. You might, instead of just doing what you're told, you might actually question if something that you don't think is right, or you think it's harmful, or you think there's something better you can do. It's more of a dialogue than someone says, hey, you should do this, and you just go ahead and do it. It's about not being a doormat. It's about challenging the status quo and trying to think of better ways of making things happen.
Absolutely. Part of that also is just learning to communicate well. This is something I know that it does not come naturally to everybody. There's that old joke about how do you know if an engineer is outgoing?
How, Ben?
Looks at your shoes. All right, fine.
Tough crowd.
But communication is critical on a team when you're doing software engineering because you want to let your manager and your teammates know. You want to know about your victories, about your failures. You want to know what your expectations are. What do you need, right? Have the answer to that question ready to go when somebody asks you, instead of just sitting there with the blinders on, doing what you're told.
And right? Obstacles, even. Remember when your team had some issues with legal, and they were like 6 weeks waiting for a response from legal, and Ben and I were having a cup of coffee, and he's like, oh my God, they're killing us, this legal stuff, not responding. And I said, why didn't you tell me? I know all these people in legal. And I got on the phone and resolved it in about an hour and a half. And that's not because I'm some amazing person, it's just because I knew who to call and talk to politely, that's how we say.
All because I communicated with you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yay, communication. So another thing that people often forget about in big companies is that people treat you the way that you ask to be treated, I guess.
Well, right. If you expect somebody to act a certain way, they often act that way.
Yeah.
Right. So it's about getting your work done. It's about nobody should be counting how many minutes you're at your desk when you check in or check out. I mean, if you get your work done, it's obvious. If you don't get your work done, it's obvious, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we mean by, and that's certainly true at Google. One of the reasons we like working there is they treat everybody like an adult by default, and it's a wonderful thing. And that is not true of other companies I have been in.
Yeah, there was a guy that came to work with us, and he was on my team a number of years ago, and he'd worked in the industry for 20 years. And it was his first day, and he was a little bit like overwhelmed. 4:45, he came up to me, he's like, look, I'm really sorry. I have an appointment that I couldn't move. I've got to go, but I'll be here 15 minutes later tomorrow. And I said, look, man, I don't care when you come and go. As long as you put in your 80 hours a week, you'll be fine.
Fitz is just cruel.
And he looked at me, and he understood that I was joking. But he did get the point that he's responsible for making things happen. And then it's not about being in a seat at a certain time. It's about being available to your team to make sure that the work gets done.
Sure. You were telling me another time when we do a conference in Chicago every winter where we rent out sort of a big hall at a university, a whole building, in fact. And one of the first times you went there, right, you went there to get the keys from the person who runs the building. And instead of a series of lectures about don't do this, don't go here, blah, 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 stay out of blah, 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 the guy was just like, look, here's the building, here are the keys, I'll get them from you on Monday. See you. And like, you know, you were telling me.
That was intimidating.
It was intimidating because it's like, wow, this person just put so much trust in me. I better leave this place better than I found it, right? They expect me to behave this way, so I'm going to live up to their expectations.
Right.
Now.
I mean, if they set up this fence and they say, you know, here's the fence, it's 6 feet tall, it's made out of concrete, don't go any further than that, you know, people will often just pile crap up against the fence because they're like, I'm being treated like a child and I'm going to act like one. I'm a caged animal, I'm going to run around and rattle the cage. People look for those boundaries, but when there are no boundaries and you're given this responsibility, I think it's a great bit of responsibility.
Yeah.
So let's talk about another thing is taking risks. If you're in a company, in an organization where you are allowed to take risks and to expand your comfort zone, you can do things like fail fast. You can take more responsibility. You can fail, document what you've learned, adapt, and then try again. And you know, failure really, if someone ever gets upset with failure, just explain to them it's a way of learning really quickly. Right? Think about anybody who have kids? You can raise your hand. If you ever see a kid burn himself on the stove, it's painful for the kid, but you know what? They learn really fast. That's hot, and they don't want to touch that. You can sit there and give them a lecture on thermodynamics and all you want, but man, they just stick their hand in there, and that's the last time they're ever going to pull that stunt.
Yeah. Also, you know, when you exercise, that's one of those things they talk about. If you work out at a gym, sometimes you want to do weights to the point where your muscles actually start to fail, because that's the point where you improve. If you always just do enough exercise so that it's comfortable and then you walk away, you never really get any better. You just stay at that level, right? If you exercise to failure, you start to push yourself, you grow, you adapt.
Right. Right. So without that risk, you really never improve.
Yeah.
So those are a few of the tips that you can do if you're living in a lovely garden that's well raked like this. Unfortunately, we're aware that most companies look a lot more like this kind of a garden. And most people work for people who look more like this.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the bad manager, which is, I mean, there's a statistic, and remember that 75% of all statistics are made up. There is a statistic that 50% of the happiness of your job comes from your manager, whether you're happy working with them or working for them. And that really is true in my experience. I've had the I'd say, opportunity to work for some really great managers in my time, not only at Google, but in other places.
So a typical bad manager is someone who essentially prevents a lot of the things we just talked about, right? They prevent you from taking any risks at all. Failure is a terrible thing. Not even the smallest failure is terrifying to the manager. And of course, that spills over to you, and then you're afraid to take any risks as well. In addition, the manager also thinks that you're there to serve him or her, right? And again, instead of what can I do for you, it's what have you done for me lately, right? So all the meetings you have are just sort of, you're on the defensive, you're always trying to prove that you have a value to him or to the company.
Right. How are you going to help me climb the ladder because I'm the manager here?
Right.
And whatever you do, I'm going to take credit for it.
Nasty.
Unless you screw up, in which case that's all you. Right? I mean, that's unfortunately how it works. And this is something that most people don't talk about, but everyone's aware of on the team, is that the bad manager will ignore people like this, low performers in the team. Okay, and that is one of the worst things that a bad manager can do.
Well, it's a huge drag on the team.
Well, it destroys the team's morale.
Right.
It causes you to lose your best performers. But I mean, you've got 6 good guys on your team and 1 person like this.
And pretty soon your best people on the team start to leave.
Because they get tired of dragging this person along, right? So this is, a good manager is someone who's really going to take care of low performers. So those are some of the things that a bad manager might do.
Other characters.
Another important person to be very wary of is the office politician.
He's awesome.
This is a very friendly person. They're usually very great at managing up. And this isn't necessarily a manager. This might be another engineer on your team. They're very quick to take credit for something that happens. They're also very quick to assign blame. But they put a lot of energy into looking impactful, but not being impactful.
Perception is 9/10 of the law.
Exactly. Perception is 9/10 of the law.
And they understand that, and they do everything to make their perception as important as possible.
And the thing that most engineers will do when they encounter someone like this is they'll just go heads down and ignore them and say, I'm going to write great code. I'm going to have a great product.
Engineers hate politics.
Because
right?
I don't like politics, and I don't want to deal with this person. But that's very dangerous, because if you're not careful, this person can wind up getting promoted and be your manager. We've seen that happen too. So there's someone to steer around, but it's another example of why, even if you don't like dealing with like the promotion process or stuff like that, it's important to pay attention to that sort of thing, because it's a way of getting yourself into a safe place.
You don't want to get run over by this person.
Right, exactly.
If you're passive, that can happen very easily. So let's talk about the organization itself now, not just the people you run into.
Yeah.
There are many types of bad organizations out there.
This is one, for example.
And what are the stereotypes we all know about, like what makes a corporation hostile to employees?
Hey Ben, I'd like you to finish that product by Thursday, and
Awesome.
I want you to also test it. I want you to QA it, push it into production, and I have a new feature I'd like to add in as well.
Didn't you just take somebody away from my team?
Yeah, but you should be skydiving in with the product tomorrow.
Excellent.
As well.
No problem. So, right.
And don't forget the bike and the rappelling.
Impossible.
Right.
So yeah, impossible schedules, impossible expectations, not enough resources to get done what they're asking you to do.
And we're talking about resources, we mean like
People.
computing resources, not people. People are not resources, they're people.
You don't like it when people
I
call
don't
them?
like it when people
How many
call
resources
people.
do you have on your team?
Yeah.
I know that's a pet peeve.
But we've all seen companies where you can spend $3,000 on hardware and save hundreds of engineer hours, but companies don't do that because you're already there and you're going on. That's a capital expenditure. You're just a payroll expenditure. And
Yeah, they don't do the math at the big scale.
yeah, so that's definitely something to be wary about.
So something else that big corporations tend to do is they simply don't trust you. And we talked about trust earlier, right? They treat you like a caged animal. They treat you like a naughty child. They just see you as replaceable, expendable. And in the worst case, they just see you as a cog in a machine. This person is here to do X units of work in Y amount of time and turn the key and it should all just work. And that's just we're not doing an assembly line here, right? This is a creative job that requires a creative environment and a lot of social skills to survive. It's not just line up replaceable parts and turn the knob.
There's a lot of different technological ways that this happens. You get time cards where you punch in and you punch out, or you're caged by your IT department insofar as we're going to set up a big firewall and prevent you from going to any website that might distract you or waste your time. And we see companies do this all the time. We're going to prevent people from checking their personal mail or from using instant messenger, all that sort of thing.
Just like a naughty child.
Exactly, just like a naughty child. And we're going to measure your productivity in great ways, like lines of code. Right? See how many lines of code you wrote today. That's a great way to encourage people to write lots of lines of code, of crappy code. Right?
More code is always better. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'd like to rate people on how much code they delete myself. But,
yeah, that's true. Yeah, hard metric.
So beyond this, things start to get a little fuzzier, right? Some companies suffer from this complete chaos of direction, where there's too many leaders without a central vision. You might have 7 different bosses given contradictory directions. What was it, the quote from Office Space? Bob, I have 7 bosses, or 8 bosses, or whatever it was, right? But it's often, another characteristic of this organization is one that's obsessed with titles and hierarchy and political power struggles. And I have you on my team, and you're miserable, and you really want to go work on that team, but I'm not letting go of you because if you leave, I can't get anyone else.
It's just that the amount of distraction is huge too, right? Even if you put forth Herculean effort to achieve these impossible goals, if different bosses are moving the goalposts around all the time, depending where you talk, it's just infuriating, right? It just drives you insane.
And to some extent, this exists in even companies that are well organized and high functioning. But years ago, when I first became a manager at Google, I was in my happy little land writing code and shipping code and moving things into production. Everything seemed pretty straightforward to me. I knew right where we were going. And then I became a manager, and I was talking to all these other higher-ups, and suddenly there's all these different things. Maybe we should do this, maybe we should do that. And I went and talked to the guy who had previously been managed, and I said, the company's going crazy all of a sudden.
What happened?
I'm like, we were all going this way, and now it's like all like this. And he's like, man, it's been like this forever. He's like, I've just been hiding all that crap from you because
really good manager.
It's a distraction. And I'm like, wow, you weren't as bad as I thought you were.
No, that is, yeah. But that's the sign of a great leader or manager, right? That protects the reports from that chaos so they can get their work done. It's fantastic when that.
It's also a sign of a great cleaning person, right? You only notice it when they're gone. You're like, this place is a dump.
Well, let's talk about how we actually get things done in a dysfunctional organization, or even just a large organization, because the amount of dysfunction varies from place to place.
This is how you're going to survive in a particularly toxic environment, right?
There's the magic question.
The magic question.
So the first thing we like to talk about, and this is something you'll actually hear a lot at Google, it's attributed to various famous folks, I forgot.
No, it's attributed to Grace Hopper, I believe.
Yes, yes.
And if anyone hasn't seen Grace Hopper's talk on nanoseconds, go check it out. It's on the internet. Right. We're big fans of the internet.
So the trick here is, this is about risk-taking, but it's a particular kind of risk-taking, right? It's know how far you can go without seriously jeopardizing, your career or the risk of getting fired, right? But you'll discover it's amazing. If you know something needs to be done, you know what the right thing is to do, and you go in there and you start asking your 7 bosses, can I do this? Can I do this? Every time you ask someone is an invitation to say no. And that's the default answer, right? Especially in an organization where people are afraid of failure or risk. So,
and the reason a lot of people ask permission is because you're alleviating yourself of responsibility. I could be, look, I asked the Bobs, they said it was okay, or they said no, so the Bobs are preventing me from getting stuff done.
It's scary to take responsibility when you're doing a risk, but often that's the only way to get anything done. So act first, apologize later. That's the other way I've heard this phrased. And don't do anything that you can't undo, right? That's sort of the rule of thumb, I suppose. And be prepared to back up your decision if someone does come to you and say, why on earth did you do this? And if it fails, try again, right? But at least you're getting something way more done than the folks who are scared or folks who are just asking permission being turned down all the time.
And you can usually choose the action or the consequences, but not both.
I like this, yes.
Okay,
so give an example.
An example is
control either the action or the consequence of the action.
Right. So I can launch a product, but I don't know how it's going to come out necessarily, or I can not launch a product and I know that nothing's bad's going to happen. Or it's often you'll see this a lot in family situations, right? I'm going to say something to my family because gosh darn it, I'm going to show them that this is the way it's going to be.
But then you can't control the result.
And you can't control their way that they're going to act or the way that they're going to behave. So.
But what I'm saying is the other side is
you can change your actions to achieve a particular consequence.
If I want my uncle to be happy, if the result is that I want my uncle to be happy, then I have to work backwards and do an action that I know is going to cause.
And that's definitely the case in companies. And it's not a rational thing. Some people would say, well, I'm going to act this way, and you should act this way. If you ever hear yourself saying to someone, well, so-and-so should do something, you should just stop right there. Should is a magic word that shows up in your head that means that you are trying to control the future. And that's really difficult unless you're Batman or Sergey Brin. Or both. I don't know. So, not saying anything here.
I've never seen them together.
I've never seen them
very
together
strange.
either. Yeah.
So let's talk about choosing battles. This is something that comes up a lot. There's usually folks in your organization or on your team who are very opinionated. Nothing wrong with that. Problem is they don't always know which fights to choose, and that is a hard lesson to learn for some folks. They put so much energy into being so passionate about everything that they end up getting almost nothing done because they're not choosing their battles. And it tends to drag down the momentum of the team. It tends to drag down the momentum of the leader of the team, having to defend and deal with everything that's happening. So you need to know not only just which battles to choose, you need to understand what kind of political capital you're spending to win a certain battle, right?
Is it worth it?
Is it worth it, right? Are you going to spend all your capital over here, or are you going to spend it over here? Because once you've used it up, you've called in your favors, you've done whatever, you can't just turn around and have another screaming battle the next day on a different subject.
Because if you think of it as a train, and you're trying to stop every engineer that comes by every 15 minutes in the train, eventually they're just going to run you right over. And
they lose their patience.
They lose their patience, but also remember that every time people hit the brakes, you're slowing down the progress of the product, right? So that's something that you've really got to be careful and think about. Is it worth it? If you're gonna ask permission, or if you're going to beg forgiveness rather than ask for permission, make sure it's for the right thing. Or you don't want to spend all your capital, your political capital, on like making T-shirts or something. It'd be better to like spend it on launching a product.
Now sometimes you have a really great idea, but you're not sure how to communicate it upwards in the organization or laterally to other teams, and you'll fight a battle and you'll scream about it. And it turns out sometimes the best way to get your idea out there is not to make a giant stink about it, but instead to do the sort of the subtle, subliminal way of moving the message around. So it turns out that your ideas can go really, really far in a company.
Really far.
If you don't take the credit for it, or if you just don't care whether you get credit for the idea. So it can be something as simple at the grassroots level, it's just sort of whispering this idea to certain friends or to certain people on other teams at the lunch table, or mention it in passing when a VP is walking by and maybe they'll overhear. It's an art form in itself, but it's actually pretty powerful. We've seen this happen, right? Where an idea, and by the time maybe somebody at the top who is a decision maker hears the idea formally presented, there's been so much buzz about it already in the company that it doesn't seem like such a crazy idea.
And you can actively use this if you're trying to change someone's mind in your organization, is tell people that you know who trust you that they trust, and ask them to mention the idea to that person. And if they hear it from 8 different, even if they know what's going on, if they keep hearing this over and over again, they're going to be like, hey. And next thing you know, you hear it coming out of some vice president's mouth at a press conference or something. And your response could be, hey, that's my idea. Or you can be like, hey, that's my idea. That's
which is great.
Right?
Right, yeah. I mean, what's more important, that it happens or that you get the credit? Right.
Sometimes again, you have to choose. Right? You have to choose sometimes. So let's talk about habits, right? Anyone here has ever attempted to quit something, like quit smoking, quit drinking? Some people I know have to quit eating. But bad habits or systems really can't be destroyed, but we found that they can be replaced by a new habit. Okay, you have a great example of this you did with one of the teams you work with.
Yeah, well, we had one of the teams I took over, or at least for a while, had this standing meeting. I know it was Agile, Scrum, something.
It was Agile at one point.
Yeah, I'm not trained in those magic techniques. But it was every morning, we're going to all stand here for 20 minutes or whatever and go around in a circle, blah, blah, blah. And people were kind of frustrated with it, but they were just doing it out of habit.
Well, but it turned into an hour, right? They were sitting down, and it was like group therapy. Well, I went out last night, and, and I don't have anything really to say, but I want to talk about Rails,
But the thing is, ow.
Hey, it's cool.
Oh, stop. But the point is, it wasn't a totally useless meeting, right? Like, there were some nuggets of communication going on in there. So it would not have been probably that smart to just be like, this is stupid, kill this meeting forever, go away. Instead, we just replaced it. We said, all right, let's instead have just an email thread that goes out every morning, right? You have a cron job that just sends an email saying, hey, what's going on? What did you do yesterday? What are you blocked on today? Everybody reply to this thread, right? Everybody spends 30 seconds replying. You're done. People can read the thread whenever they want. So much more efficient, gets the exact same sort of thing done. And it sparks off side conversations, which is all that matters, right? That's what we wanted.
But there's one sneaky thing you did as well on that, is that, and this is a sneaky technique for introducing anything new or changing anything, is 3 magic words. Let's try this.
We can always undo.
Let's try this for 30 days. Let's try this for 2 weeks.
Right.
Let's see what happens. If it doesn't work, everybody hates it, we'll go back. And oftentimes people are like, oh my God, it's not permanent. We can actually just try something for 2 days. Okay, and then after 3 weeks, they're like, oh, it wasn't so bad.
Or they just forget it was a trial. They just do it forever. That's usually what happens.
Right. So
if it goes well.
So and beyond that, let's talk about back to the organization and moving around. This is something that most engineers we know, and it's often been abhorrent to us, I think, as well, is the ladder of a company. Okay, we talked earlier about the office politician who's always sort of working it and trying to go up the ladder, and most of these bad companies, the bad organizations, there's a mismatch between doing the right thing for the company and doing the right thing to get promoted. Okay, so you have to make a choice, and it doesn't have to be black or white. It can be a little bit of a gray blend. You can do a little bit of both, but it's dangerous if you choose to always do the right thing and ignore being promoted. Okay, so as we mentioned earlier, you should climb this ladder until you get to a safe place, and so it is worthwhile to spend energy on that.
This works particularly in companies that are very power driven, where hierarchy and title is right at the forefront of everybody's mind, that if you can get yourself up to a high title, then people will leave you alone because you've got power, right? Or some imaginary title that tells people to leave you alone. Just working the system, right?
Yeah, it's your bubble, it's your safe haven.
Now,
right?
a companion to that idea is, not only can you work up the ladder to the point where nobody can tell you what to do, you can go find some place in the company to hide. It sounds crazy, but there are projects that don't get bothered. There are teams that have so much credibility that no one will question or bug you or just give you a bunch of freedom that you might not have otherwise.
There's often an executive who values what you're doing as well,
Right.
more than some other executive that might be in a different part of the company. So moving to a different department or a different team or something is often a good way of being safe when the nuclear war comes.
Sometimes you have to do this every couple of years as a company changes if you want to stay happy.
Some of us have been in companies that, every fifth Thursday is layoff Thursday. I worked at a company years ago that I will not name, and nobody answered the phone on a Thursday, right? And if your boss showed up in your office all of a sudden, it was just panic time. But
Let's talk about perception.
Perception, yes. Upward perception.
This is a tricky thing, right? We said earlier that perception is 9/10 of the law. And so what that really means is being aware not just of getting stuff done and doing the right thing, but always be thinking in the back of your head, how does this look to people not on my team or people above my level? What are they perceiving, right? Because that is at least as important as what you're actually doing. The office politician knows this, right? And you need to at least, maybe you don't need to manipulate people the way the office politician does, but at least you need to be aware of it and make sure it is not misrepresenting what you're actually doing.
Right.
So you want to launch things as much as possible, because that creates a great perception. You want to underpromise, you want to over-deliver, right? These are all things we strive for. And I personally, I had problems with this when I first became a manager, a leader. My team had, the project company, we had a huge amount of technical debt. And it was just crushing us. So the first thing I said, all right, guys, I'm the new leader here. We really need to hunker down and spend the next 6 or 9 months just focusing on our technical debt so that we can be free of these shackles and then move on, right?
And your director said,
yeah,
great
the director
idea.
was like, that's great, we love it, you should totally do that. Of course, he was completely wrong. He didn't actually.
He wasn't lying.
Well, he didn't. He thought it was a great idea intellectually.
Great idea.
The problem is, and this is something I've come to think about later, is that I have this idea in my head now of what we call offensive versus defensive work. Offensive work is work that is very visible to outsiders, like write a new shiny feature, right? Make this product faster. Anything that's going to be impressive to people outside your team.
A lot faster.
Really visible, right? Defensive work is just as important as offensive work. It's all the invisible work, right? Oh, we're going to maintain the product. We're going to migrate the database. We're going to refactor code so it's more maintainable, right? We're going to make our monitoring of our systems more robust so we have better uptime. That's all stuff that is completely thankless when management looks down. It looks like you're doing nothing. And that was a huge slap in my face, because after 6 months, my director was like, why aren't you guys doing anything? I'm like, oh, look, we did all this. Look, we're doing so much work. And like, looks like you're doing nothing to me, and he was annoyed.
Looks like you're fixing crap that you broke in the first place.
Yeah, right. So,
right? It was like, why didn't you write it right the first time?
There's no sympathy. There's no. So that's the sad politics there, is that even though defensive work is just as important as offensive work, you cannot spend all your time on defensive work.
And to be clear, this isn't a malicious attitude that people have. It's just it's
human psyche.
Perception is 9/10 of the law, and that's absolutely the way it is.
So we have a rule of thumb now where usually never spend more than about a third of your time and energy as a team on defensive work. Because if you do more than that, then people just think you're holding still. And
if you do less than that, your product falls over.
Right. But it's a tricky balance to find, but you have to stay aware of that.
So the next we want to talk about, I want to make you an offer that you can't refuse. Think of the movie The Godfather, right? There's a favor economy, right? That isn't necessarily done, and there's not cash. It's like someone asks you to do something that you can easily do.
Or you could easily say no.
You can easily say no, but it's typically going to be easier for you to do it or make it happen than for them. And it's very much in your best interest most of the time to do that for someone. Now,
not in the short term. Right?
Not in the short term, because it could take a little bit of your time. And I'm not saying that you should be a doormat or let anyone walk over you or someone continue to take advantage of you. But look for opportunities to help. And these are the kind of things, it's like making small bets, right? Where there's no real house edge here. You make a small bet, and some of them you're just going to lose. Like $1, gone. Buck, it's gone. But every once in a while, you're going to win the lottery, and it's going to come back and pay you back in
So
spades.
we talk about building up trust as making these false favors, right? You're building up karma and trust that will come back eventually, right? There was a great quote somebody gave when we talked about this idea with them, and they said, the quote was, "Friends come and go, but enemies accumulate." So it's a great thing, because basically saying don't burn bridges, right? That's the corollary to this theme, is that it will destroy your karma and trust in this favor economy if you leave and burn a bridge.
And sometimes you do get very quick return, right? I mean, like the recruiting team called us up and they say, hey, you guys are those two nerds with the lab coats, right? We want to do some videos where people can talk to engineers, ask questions of Google engineers. Would you guys mind taking some time to do a video? Now, it was
could have said no.
It could have said no. It was a half hour, 45 minutes out of our day. And we said, oh, sure, we'll do that. And so they got us, we did this video for them. And they were super glad to throw some extra recruiting resources to help us find some people for our teams. Because, now they know us. Anyone in recruiting is like, hey, you guys, you've been a huge help. And it's actually been a bigger bet because other recruiters worldwide are using this video to recruit more people.
We get to do fun things like interviews at I.O. for the live stream because of what we started with, right? Because of the small favors.
Those are just some really visible examples, but it extends to absolutely everything. There's a book called The Luck Factor. Anyone heard of it? The guy did a test. He put an ad out and he said, are you lucky or unlucky? Please come take a small survey.
Who responds to an ad like that?
Yeah, do you consider yourself lucky or unlucky? Please, take this. I guess it's people who don't have a job. I don't know. So he had all these people come in who said that, and he said, are you lucky or unlucky? They'd say, I'm lucky, or not. And then he'd say, here's the front page of a newspaper. I'd like you to read this. I'm going to time you. And we're going to see how fast you can count all the pictures in the front section of the newspaper. Ready? Go. And now the average person who considers themselves unlucky took about 2 minutes and 16 seconds to find all the pictures. The average lucky person took less than 4 seconds to find all the pictures.
How is that possible?
That's possible. In the middle of the third page, in 144-point type, it said there are 42 pictures in this section. Okay? The unlucky people were very focused on exactly the task at hand and nothing else. The lucky people were the people who maybe looked a little bit outside. Right? And so the point of this book is that you can actually manufacture luck for yourself. And the favor economy in a company is a way of making luck. And so we're big fans of that.
Love it. So it also helps to, sort of following on this theme of the favor economy, is finding influential friends. And what we mean by that is there's certain categories of people within a company who are very useful allies to have, and we'll talk about them.
Well, I mean, sometimes it's useful years and years later, right?
Yeah, it turns out I ended up managing my former TA in college, became my report. It was very strange.
It's a good thing he was nice to you.
He was very nice to me, right? But again, that's all about, don't burn bridges, right? Because you never know the person who you have a fight with now may be your manager in the next company. Right?
Especially in the tech world. The tech world is super, super, way smaller than you think of it, okay?
Surprisingly
Our friend Carl likes to say there's only about 3,000 people in the tech world. Everyone else is local color, right? so think about that next time you quit your job and want to go out in a big blaze of glory and tell everybody exactly what you think about them.
Jump off the plane, go down the chute. Right?
Yeah, take your beer and hit the chute, right? So the first kind of person is a connector, right? These are people who basically, one of their part-time jobs is connecting you with other people. And you can usually know, if someone says, if you need to get a hold of somebody in the company, you don't know where to go, they're the person you're going to say, hey, you have any tips? And they'll be like, yep, talk to Megan.
Human routers.
Talk to Steve. Yeah, exactly.
They are literally human routers.
They're very well connected. Beyond the connectors, find people who have influence, right, within the company. We happen to be lucky to have Vint Cerf, who discovers wonderful things like the internet.
But also, they aren't necessarily celebrities either, right? So they could just be someone who's been at the company for 20 years, a real old-timer, may not be in a great position of power, but boy, they know how the company works, they know who everybody is, and they are sort of secretly able to influence things just behind the scenes.
With very subtle movements.
Right.
Right.
Good ways to whisper those ideas that you don't want to take credit for necessarily.
Now I'd like to stop for a second and give you all a word of warning. Do not screw with administrative assistants. Okay? You might think it's just some guy or woman or whatever at a typewriter and typing stuff up, all right?
They look harmless.
They look harmless, but they will cut you. Okay?
If you
cross this person, she will ruin your life, okay? Administrative assistants, and I'm not saying that, again, we're not talking about manipulating, we're talking about manipulating, we're talking about being like that office politician. We're just talking about a little bit of yes time, a little bit of politeness. It goes a long way. It really does.
There's an immense amount of power I mean, there's like the official org chart, then there's the real chart of power, and administrative assistants are right in there, way more powerful than you think.
Well, a good administrative assistant will wield their executive's power. And they'll
as a
good,
proxy, right?
Sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. But yeah, so you don't
So-
want to be on the wrong side of that.
Great. So the other thing, just talking about in terms of communicating with people, a lot of people love to do electronic communication, right? You're going to do email, you're going to do chat rooms, you're going to do instant messages.
Hangouts on air.
Hangouts on air. FaceTime is a huge deal, right? This mere act of getting on a plane and flying to the other branch of your company or just driving to wherever the other office is, being in somebody's face has a massive impact, not just on the ability to get things done, just in the connection you make with that person, right? 10 minutes in the face of an executive or whatever is going to have a much more memorable connection to that person than 20 emails you have over 2 weeks, right? It's just not the same.
I learned this lesson. I've known this for years, but I decided to take a shortcut a few months ago. I had a meeting with the senior vice president. It's a 15-minute meeting. I wasn't going to fly out to Mountain View for that or anything. And we had a global outage of our video conferencing system. And so then I backed off to Google Voice, which was out. Okay, so I'm in my cell phone, kneeling down in the corner of our building, trying to get a signal with my one hand in my ear and my phone up against my head. And they can't hear. They heard every third word, right? So that's a very extreme example. But being there, being in person, being there face to face in person, is not only more helpful in the room, but where it helps is coming into the room and going out of the room, right? You've got a little more time. Hey, how was your weekend? What did you do? What's going on? You wind up with chance encounters in the hallway. You might walk to the next meeting with this person, get a few extra minutes.
Right.
It's another reason why we talk about how it's so important for teams to have lunch together. We give tours of our office in Chicago, and we show them the cafe where you get free lunch for Google. And a lot of people will say, I don't know how Google can afford this. And the answer is, how can Google not afford this?
The return on investment.
It's
so great.
Huge to get your teams, even if they're not talking about your product, get people together for lunch, get them to understand that they're working with other human beings that have lives and children, perhaps.
Absolutely. Some of the things, sometimes when you're trying to do electronic communication with people, they don't respond, or they're too busy, right? It's amazing when you just pop your face over at their desk, or this is crazy. Sometimes we pick up the phone and we call their desk and they jump because they're like, what's that thing ringing on my desk? I forgot it was there. What is that for? But
how many engineers hate the phone? I mean, I just hate the phone. I don't even have a phone on my desk anymore. It rings through Gmail, which is kind of cool. But even when that rings, I'm like, what is that? I prefer the asynchronous communication.
So there is a trick. Sometimes you need to communicate with executives, right? Something's important enough that you actually need to get in front of them and ask them for something. And there is an anti-pattern, and there's a pattern here we want to promote. The anti-pattern is maybe you're not right in front of their face, maybe you just want to send an email, right? And the anti-pattern is you go in and you write this long rant, this tirade about something's wrong, blah, 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 this is wrong, and then I did this, and this was, and it's 15 paragraphs long.
No line breaks.
No line. And all sorts
this is your chance.
All sorts of questions in there, embedded in there, right? And what does an executive do when they get an email like that?
Delete.
Right. Now, why do they do that?
Because they just don't have time to understand it.
Right.
A busy executive gets about 10 seconds to go through. If any of you have ever seen an exec's inbox, it looks like a distributed denial of service. Okay? Because the emails just come, and they come from everywhere.
Right.
And so you get about 10 seconds of their time before they time out. So if they get 10 seconds into your first paragraph and you're on bullet point 1 of 612, and they can't figure out the point, they're just going to delete it. I wish I could help this guy, just don't have time. And people, like Ben said, will usually rant forever.
So we have a technique that we think works pretty well, has worked for us. We call it the 3 bullets and a call to action. So essentially, you make 3 short bullet points, 1 sentence each if possible. We love this example.
This is how to get a pony.
Right.
No, this is a fun example.
And then a single request at the end.
A single request. This is a
Not-
great example, but I would like to disclaim once again that it doesn't work for insane things. Okay? It doesn't work for getting a pony. It doesn't work for getting Ford to buy your new laser windshield wiper idea, and it's not going to get you a meeting with the CEO of Amazon.
But it did work one time when you were working for Apple, before you worked at Google.
I've been refining this since the first version of this worked for me. I was at Apple about
10 years ago?
11 years ago, and I bought my mom one of those big strawberry iMacs, right? It turned out it was a lemon iMac, and it just kept failing, and it spent more time in the shop than ever. And I was super mad and super frustrated. And somebody was like, hey, Steve's email is sjobs@apple.com.
Just mail Steve.
Great. Oh my God. And I just started ranting. My mom got this computer and she works at a school and she did this and she did that. And then she rebooted. And then, it was like 3,000 words. And this very wise guy I worked with said, look, man, you're just wasting your time. He's like, make it short. Really short and a call to action. So I made it really short, as short as I could, which was still too long. And then I said, look, basically, I just want to resolve this so my mom doesn't have this crappy, broken computer. Because I feel bad. I work at Apple. I'm trying to defend it. And she's telling all her friends that she's got this busted computer. And about 15 hours later, I got a call from somebody who worked for Steve and said, hey.
Administrative assistant, perhaps?
No, it wasn't actually. Okay. It was someone in corporate executive relations, which is an assistant of sorts. And a week later, my mom had a new Mac, right? And we've actually we've refined this and we've tried this over the years. And the shorter you go, and when I say 3 bullet points, I mean 3 80-character bullet points. Okay, you can't just keep going. None of this line wrap stuff, right?
Now, sometimes you can make links to other, like if you want more detail, if they really think they're going to need background, you can put a hyperlink in there or draw a line and say, detail is below if you care, right? But as long as the top can be parsed in 10 seconds, you're set.
Right. So sometimes I'll do that. I'll put at the top, brief summary and then long, boring, long-winded rant.
TLDR version.
After your signature and everything, right? Yeah. But the fact of the matter is that executives usually, if they can wave a magic wand and have someone that works for them make some, right some wrong or fix some injustice.
They want to do good.
That is the best feeling in the world. They feel like Superman or Wonder Woman. They're like, let's make this happen. This is 10 seconds of my time. I forwarded an email. But if they can't parse it, they're just going to delete it and get rid of it.
So give them a chance to be awesome.
Super valuable trick.
So what happens if you're in a bad company and you try all these things, and things still are horrible? Right?
You go to Plan B, right?
Plan B. What is Plan B?
So we're going to talk about Plan B. This takes a little bit of time, but we've got another 45 minutes here. This is Plan B. Plan B is get the hell out of there. Now,
a lot of people don't consider this option. It's just funny to me.
We say this as a little tongue-in-cheek, and we're trying to be a little funny here, but we've been giving these talks since 2007 now, 2006 technically, I guess. And after these talks, every year, someone comes up to us and says, all that stuff you said is great, but I've tried this and I've done that and I've done that, and I just can't make anything happen in my company. And last year at I.O., this guy came up and he asked me all these things. In fact, it was 2 years ago.
Yep.
He said, all this stuff. He's like, what can I do? And I said, get the hell out of there. I said, update your resume, start focusing your energy into maybe some classes or training you might need.
Don't be a victim.
Or whatever
right?
But don't be a victim. If you can't change or navigate the system, start putting your energy into leaving. Learn your new skills. Start a job hunt. I got an email from this guy a couple months ago, and he said, hey, you're the guy that told me to get the hell out of my job 2 years ago. And I went and took classes, and I am now just got a job offer in Japan as a product manager for my dream company. So thanks for swearing at me. Right? But this is an option. The minute you realize that you can leave, it's incredibly liberating.
Empowering, right?
And you want to tell Meng's story? Meng has a story about.
You tell that story.
Okay, so Meng, Shadow Meng Tan, who works at Google, just wrote a book. It's called Search Inside Yourself. But he has a blog, and he talks about a lot of really interesting things. And he wrote a post earlier this year that said, every day I go into work and I do the right thing, what I think is the right thing, and then I sit back and I wait to get fired. And if I don't get fired, then I realize that this is the right company for me to be working at. Yeah. He said, and if I do get fired, then I realize the company's done me a favor. It's done us both a favor because I won't be trying to do the wrong thing for them, and they won't be trying to do the wrong thing for me. Now, I know this is a little bit of an extreme case, and I'm very much aware that not everyone has this luxury.
But it's a nice philosophy to think
but
about.
it is a
right?
nice philosophy. I mean, he went on to describe that his dad lived by this philosophy, and every day he would drive home and he would look at the government-subsidized housing in the way, and he'd think to himself, if I ever screw up or get fired, that's where I'm going to wind up living, as a reminder to himself of what he had and what he didn't have.
So there we go.
So that's it.
Let's talk about, well, just
a few more
recapping,
things.
I guess, just a few. So remember, the companies are made of people. There's one thing you remember from this talk, and being successful as a software engineer means not just being successful with your code base or knowing the latest technologies. It also means learning how to deal with people and how to deal with corporate politics. It's just as important, and it's something, unfortunately, you can only learn through experience for the most part.
It's efficiency and it's effectiveness. It's not just about touchy-feely, lovey-dovey crap. It's about a way to make your stuff go a lot further with a lot less effort.
And you will be happier.
And you'll be happier. Now, so before we wrap up, we've been giving these talks for 6 years now. You may have seen or heard of some of our talks. They're all available on YouTube, and I think they're going to come in here eventually.
So pretty.
Yeah, we love the effect.
You may have seen us on the internet.
Yes.
So yeah, we have a bunch of these
and
talks.
now we have this talk, and so we're really happy actually to announce, we've never announced this publicly here other than occasionally on our G+ accounts, but we've written a book that incorporates this and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's called Team Geek, and it's available. You can pre-order it on, we won't give you any particular bookseller to buy it from, like Amazon, but you can buy it from wherever you like. And that is, you'll find information about this talk as well as the other stuff in here, but it's all about people aspect of software engineering.
It'll be out in a couple of weeks, and so we have little cards if you're interested.
Oh, they're at the door.
Or at the door, I suppose. So thank you, guys.
Thank you very much for your time. Now, if you want to leave, feel free to run off. We do have some time for Q&A. We have 2 microphones here.
Please step up to
So
the mics
please step up.
if you have questions.
If there's anything we can clarify, otherwise we'll be hanging around here. Any questions? Let's see if anybody hits the mics, or if we scared everyone away. Oh, here comes someone. First question.
Hello.
Good afternoon. A little quick background. I work in a Fortune 10 company. It has 500,000 employees. Right. And one of the big things that we do is, like you said, perception is 9/10, and it's almost 10/10 in some points. And I've seen it. I've seen very technical engineers work up the ladder through hard work, but a lot of perception because they understood the climate very well. But then when they got to a certain level, they began to lose some of that thing that made them magical, having the technical people in the top levels still be technical and still understand. They get lost in spreadsheets and finance records and whatnot. So you being technical managers, how did you keep that?
I think to some degree we're lucky at Google, it's a rare thing. They actually have 2 different ladders, one for engineering and one for engineering management, and they do not cross the ladders, and they never force anyone to move from one ladder to another, which is unusual. Typically, in a usual company, the best engineer climbs up the ladder, and then in order to advance, they have to become a manager. And now you've lost the world's best engineer, and you've gained the world's worst manager. It's awful.
And then that engineer usually leaves.
Yeah.
So I think we're immune from that a little bit, but I think there's always some element of it, and to some extent you can push it off. To some extent you can navigate around it, but that's very tricky. It really is.
That's an argument for focusing on social skills explicitly and political navigation, not just relying on your technical expertise and hoping for a meritocracy, right? I mean, that's just an argument, I suppose, that something they need to think about and focus on as an actual activity, right?
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next, please.
Hi there. You touched on a few things in your talk about this, but I was wondering if you have some specific recommendations for staying sane when you're managing a satellite office at a large company.
Ooh, geographical distribution.
Yes.
That's a tricky.
Other than liberal applications of alcohol?
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. That's a really good question. Are you talking about avoiding the need to have to travel all the darn time?
Balancing the travel, not going stir crazy, staying connected. There's
Interesting.
You guys are familiar with these
Well, yeah, we talk about this in the book a little bit. One of the things that we find really useful, I mean, the reason a lot of companies, like Google, for example, is They like people to be geographically centered in one place because there's so much value in FaceTime and just being able to swivel around in your chair and ask the right person to, right next to you a question, as opposed to sending them an email or getting on the phone or whatever. There's a lot of, you want the friction to be as low as possible. One way we have found working on distributed teams, we've been in that situation, is to actually have like a chat, like a continuous chat room.
Well,
like
one of my
IRC in
teams has
particular.
a Chromebook, actually. Talk about IRC first, then I'll go on.
Well, IRC, right, for those people who remember what it is, it's an actual group chat system designed for group chat, not IM with some like party feature stapled on, which is it's noticeably different. Everybody would literally just hang out in an IRC chat room all day long, corner of their screen dedicated to it, and that became, for a distributed team working in 3 different offices, that became our substitute. Sit in a circle, swivel all our chairs around to talk to each other. You could fire a question in there anytime, everybody would see it, everybody would reply. And it creates partially that illusion of being in the same room with everybody. It really helps.
One of my teams actually, they use a lot of chat, but they also, I gave them a Chromebook and they set it up in their between 2 of the engineers. And VC, we set the Chromebook to the engineer in the remote office. And they had that up pretty much half the day or so. As a way to just quick grab a question or.
It is strange to see a floating head in the middle of a bullpen. Is that
when
your other
people
teammate?
are coding, they look very angry most of the time. But it's you have to use everything in your power to do that. And the fact of the matter is that the engineers who are in the remote office and having been in the remote office for many years, it takes more work. It takes more effort to get where you're going. And the advantage of that is you get to live where you want. So
it's a trade-off.
It's a trade-off,
right?
and we've made that trade-off, and we've built an engineering office in Chicago with the help of a lot of other people. But it's never friction-free and 100%, and you're still gonna have to get on the plane once in a while.
Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
We're almost out of time here.
Almost out of time?
Want to do one more question?
One last
or was it-
question?
or
Anyone?
We'll go out in the hall if you guys want to ask.
Yeah,
more
we'll
questions.
head out in the hall and talk
Great.
some more. But thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.